I was also getting into the music there, Mike.
I know. That's some
StreamYard
groovy music you got there, Anders. That's very, very cool.
It's very cool. All right, it's built in. It's built in. Welcome to Engaging Personalities. Oh, look at that. You're so inclusive.
I'm including all mammals that may have joined us.
That's great.
But not the reptiles, sadly.
That's right. Yeah, down with reptiles. I've created this stream just to interview people I know who are engaging, and I want to kind of dig into that and find out a little bit more, because here at Engagify we help companies make their people and their events more engaging, and I think that any skill is trainable. I'll get your opinion in a second, Mike. But I want to introduce a Hall of Fame speaker, an author, a workplace culture expert, Michael Kerr. Mike, thanks for joining me here.
It is an honor to be here, Anders. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good. It was like we were kind of catching up in the green room there, and I was kind of like, oh, let's bottle this a little bit. Like I don't want to chat with you too much until we get out here. So, Mike, I've known you for I think my very first Canadian Association of Professional Speakers conference. I think I met you, or maybe I met you in Winnipeg when we had it here. But anyways, I've known you a long time. You've always kind of been front and center in the association and leading, and you were the past president of CAPS just this past year. So I've always found you as a very engaging and obviously a funny man as well. You have a great.
Go on.
We're just going to stroke each other's egos for the.
Tell me more how wonderful I am, Anders. If we could just spend the next 20 minutes talking about that's fine.
Yeah. So I kind of want to just kind of dig into how you became you in a sense. And first of all, let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that engaging people are born or made?
Yes. Yes.
Seat on the fence.
No. I think obviously there's an element of genetics to any of our personality features, but I agree with you. I totally think this is a teachable, trainable skill that anybody can be a little more engaging, or even with the right training, a lot more engaging. If they hire somebody as brilliant as you, Anders, I'm sure you could help them be way more engaging.
Coming back. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, no, I think that is true, though, is that if there's a structure or elements to something, and then things can be coached and teased out of people. So let me ask you, like, how did you get started? Like, were you the class cut up or clown or something like that? Is that kind of like you've always kind of been doing that kind of thing and being in front of people, or how would you?
Yeah, today is official Wonderful Weirdos Day, and
I saw that when you pointed that.
I know, perfect, right? And yeah, I was probably a bit of a wonderful weirdo growing up. I was incredibly shy, though, really, really introverted, really painfully shy with adults as a kid. Mm-hmm. But I was, in certain situations, a bit of the class clown, the stereotypical class clown. So I think I always had a quirky, goofy sense of humor. But I've also learned to grow my sense of humor. I have definitely, like any other skill, even humor, I think is something you can grow, you can nurture, you can train. A lot of it is just mindset, how you look at the world. And like anything else, it takes practice.
Yeah. Well, and I know you have, your books often, talking about humor in the workplace and looking for humor and recording note. Oh, they're right there.
The humor advantage. Why some businesses are laughing all the way to the bank.
There you go. But I know when you've trained, some speakers and talking about keeping notebooks, and just like you are, training your brain to look for what you want, right? And that's where a lot of people, have never tuned themselves into that kind of thing, right?
Right. And one of the things I stress is having a sense of humor is not at all about telling jokes. I mean, I don't know about you, I'm horrible at remembering jokes, and I bomb jokes as much as the next person. It's not about telling jokes. Having a sense of humor isn't always about being funny. It's about appreciating the humor in the world around you, finding the funny, training your brain, as you say, Anders, to just look for and clue into the funny around you in the world, laughing at the things you have no control over, which is a lot these days, and especially being willing to laugh at yourself. Being able to laugh at yourself is so important.
You know what? Someone has now I can't remember where I saw this, but it was kind of the definition of charisma, and it was actually taking. It was almost like taking joy in oneself was what charisma was. This kind of
Right.
that idea that and so not thinking you're funny, but just being able to laugh at yourself is of course endearing and self-deprecating and that thing.
Ye- Yeah, and for me, there's a huge overlap between authenticity and laughing at yourself. In fact, there's research that shows that we trust people more who share a healthy sense of humor and who laugh at themselves more. And I think that's the reason is obvious. I think when you laugh at yourself, you become more real, you become more human, just more approachable, more
Hmm.
likable. And for the salespeople, which I know you work with, Anders, you're in the business of trust, right? So if you can laugh at yourselves in a way that's not, crucial to what it is you're selling or your skill set, but laugh at those just very human qualities about ourselves, then I think it's a really effective way to be more engaging and build
Right.
trust.
Now you touched on authenticity there a moment ago, and one of the questions we often get is that if we're going to engageify a sales team or whatever, or even sometimes it's more the technical people that do demos or do more of the uh, engineers of sorts.
Right.
They're kind of like, well, I'm not like that. You know what I mean? Like they don't want to be inauthentic to be something. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's kind of like, I think we can always kind of give more of ourselves or be more generous of
Yeah.
ourselves to create that engagement. And I just kind of want to know what, kind of what your thoughts are with that authenticity side of it, and trying to, not be someone who you're not, of course. But
Oh, that's absolutely so key. That is absolutely a huge part of it. Jerry Seinfeld once said the whole object of comedy is to be yourself. And the closer to that you get, the funnier you will be. So it's about embracing your own brand of humor, your own personality. As you say, if you're doing a presentation, if you're doing a video, if you're in a meeting with clients, then maybe you want to be a little more of you, whatever that is.
mhm,
But knowing that you can still have a very rich sense of humor, you can still be charismatic in your own quiet way.
yeah, lean into who you are in an
Yeah,
authentic
yeah.
way.
There's nothing worse than inauthentic. I mean, we've all seen it, right?
Yeah,
People look so uncomfortable,
yeah,
and they should feel uncomfortable when they try being something they're not. And this ties in even to very simple things. I think, Anders, even how people talk on the phone or answer the phone. I know some of my favorite clients, corporate clients that have call centers, for example.
hmm,
They purposely do not have their employees read from a script because they want, and now they train and coach their employees relentlessly to be engaging on those calls, but they want them to bring their personality to work, right? They want them to answer the phones in an unscripted way, professional still, but answer it with your own unique style, with your own unique flair.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's yeah. That kind of ties in back into you were saying you were shy to begin with,
Yeah.
right? And like, I'm interested in that journey too. Like, where did you come from? Shy student to Hall of Fame speaker. You've spoken all over the world. That kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, that was a must have been a personal growth piece for you then.
It was for sure. And it was actually speaking that helped me get out of my shell and overcome my shyness. And this goes back to my university days where I had to do presentations in those big scary lecture halls. And there was a turning point right in one of those talks. I used to be terrified of public speaking to the point that I remember doing one talk and somebody whispered in the front audience, "Look at his leg," because my leg was shaking. I was about to go into an Elvis routine
Yeah,
with my hips because I
yeah.
was so nervous.
Well,
And my
which is
voice,
funny because you work that in now,
yeah,
like that.
yes, I do the fun dance, right? I'm known for the fun dance. Maybe that's where that came from. But I was so nervous. My voice was it was just a disaster. It was so humiliating. But then I had another talk a few months later where I just, because of a series of comedic events that I won't get into, I ended up tapping into my sense of humor spontaneously and having fun with it. I ended up juggling through this whole talk, and that calmed my nerves. I didn't make good eye contact with the audience, but it calmed my nerves. I started having fun. And because I got calm, sitting there doing this, I started to relax. And then I just started to play with the audience. I played with the topic. I played with myself, I was going to say, but that doesn't sound very, very appropriate. But you know what I mean? And that kind of that was one of a few key moments in my life that flipped a switch for me, where I said, hey, this doesn't have to be scary. In fact, it can be a lot of fun being up in this space. And not only can it be a lot of fun, it should be a lot of fun if you want to be effective, and still to this day, I tell myself, one of the many mantras I tell myself, if I'm nervous about a talk for whatever reason, I'm anxious about the room, the audience, I just remind myself, hey, I have to remember to have fun. And if I have fun, the audience will have fun.
You know what? That resonates with me so strongly, Mike, because that's what my mom would say before I go to a magic show. And for those who don't know, I have a background in being magic since I was 5 years old. And it was like, just go have fun, and it was that kind of thing that my first trick was always like dead simple, like could not screw it up, because then, you get that first trick off and you're like, okay, good. Okay. And then you get rolling. And again, I think you're going back to that, you can be yourself, and then everything starts, coming into place.
Yeah. Now, and just reminding yourself, it's a conversation, right? People. That's what I say to myself too. I'm just having a conversation with this great group of people.
Right. And I think there's something about that conversation in knowing that you are there for them. You know what I mean? As opposed to being there for yourself.
Yeah.
Creates more of a, like, I talk about co-creation, like, like when we would do trade shows, we'd have a crowd of people around, and I'm kind of just at the front end of it. I'd say, we're going to co-create an experience here, meaning it's not me doing it for you, it's us doing it for each other.
Yeah.
That, right? You kind of get that kind of buy-in, and all of a sudden, I get like kind of a chill, because people want, that's more attractive that way too.
Absolutely. And you talk about this whole notion of engagement. I'm so glad you brought that up, because even as a keynote speaker, I know I am most on, and other keynote speakers that I watch are the most brilliant, I think, when I remember that it's a two-way conversation. Even though you might think that's a little weird to say, because you're up there speaking for an hour, it's all you speaking up there.
To come,
But it really has to be a conversation where you're playing off the audience's signals and their body language, and even if they heckle you in a fun way or interrupt something to flow, you just go with that, and you make it this improvised co-creation experience. But I want to jump on that too, because you brought up a really important point, this whole idea of just being engaging at an individual level, whether you're a salesperson or a frontline rep in a company. One of the things that I go to is, being engaging isn't just about being interesting, it's about being interested in the other people, which means half of the equation has to be listening, being in the moment, truly being present with the people you are with, being curious about them, asking them interesting, unique, different questions, sharing their passions. I don't know, a couple of years ago, I came across a study of used car salesmen in Florida, where they studied what were the top performing salesmen doing so well. And they followed these sales people around, I think, hoping that there would be some secret sauce, right? Some formula, some secret killer question that was closing their deals. And what they found was the number one thing that made these top salespeople stand out was they were the best listeners. And when you think about people that have impressed you, even maybe a former boss even, right? Think about that. How many people say, oh, I love this boss because they were such a great talker? Very few people say that. You know what they say? Always, at least to me, they say that my favorite boss was my favorite boss because she really listened.
Yeah. And so taking that and thinking like in with a speaker and an audience, it's kind of that on a larger scale, in that sense, that you're being, there for them. You talked about being in the moment. I think we talked about this another time. Like, do you have some background in improv, or you've done some improv?
Yes. Yeah.
So that really, being in the moment, and that's all you have in improv,
That's
really.
right.
You know,
That's
so
right. And the improv mindset too is that yes and approach, right? Where you play off anything that might happen and you just go with it. So if
mhm,
something weird happens in the room, you don't freak out. You don't
yeah.
let it derail you. You take that yes and approach. How can I build on that and have a little bit of fun?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Robin Bell, someone I know from trade shows, is saying listening is an art form. And yes, like that's what you were just saying, is that the best listeners, people remember. Uh,
Yeah, and remembering people's names, remembering details about people. And this is something you can train for. So if you
yeah,
want to be known as an engaging person, an engaging sales rep, customer service rep, learn people's names, use their names, learn small details about them, learn the name of their dogs and their dog's birthday, and you are going to wow them and they will talk about you.
that just reminds me, I got to book Bob Gray for.
Bob Gray, the memory guy. Yeah.
Um, so man, everything you're bringing up, my mind is just firing. Like, oh, I want to ask you about this. I want to ask you about this, and then I'm almost getting lost in behind all of these things, the avalanche of things that are happening. So, yeah, talking about listening, I remember, and then being in the moment. I remember talking to some people where I've had to make forced dinner conversation, right? And I'm trying to dig in, and then they're like, I'm an accountant. You're like, that must be fascinating. Like, you say that, and then you're searching for how it is fascinating.
Those conversation stoppers.
Right. No, but if you kind of dig into it, you find out why they're passionate about it, and then it's kind of like, oh, I can kind of, yeah, I can dig that if you dig that, right? You can kind of get into that.
Yeah. And I think a key to that, Andrews, is thinking about the questions to drive a conversation forward and not asking the same old standard questions, asking unique questions that are going to bring out
Right.
better conversation in people, right? So in your example, you say, oh, not only what do you like about your job, but asking a question like, so let me know, bring me into your world. What drives you nuts at work? Like, what's one of your biggest pet peeves right now that you're dealing with at work? Or if you had a magic wand that you could wave in your workplace, what would you do? Right? Just asking off the wall questions.
Yeah, tapping into people's passion, whether it's they hate it or they love it, I think is a great way of connecting with people.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, you talked earlier about you're saying have fun, and be there with them and co-create. Are there other, I don't know if it's philosophies that you have, or maybe like you know uh, something that you resort to? Let's say if you had a crowd of people and you needed to grab their attention, what are things that you kind of boxes you need to check in order to capture them?
In a group situation, you mean?
Either I'll let you open frame on that. What if, like, here I'll give you an example. I used to have, and I wish I had it here. I used to have this fake raccoon. Okay, but it was this, it had a spring in it, and I would hold it like this, and it would look like it's real. And I remember being in Saskatoon. So yeah, okay, so there you go. Something that's your go-to thing, right? Like your flower hat. That's exactly what I'm saying. But I remember performing for a room full of drunk farmers in like later at night. It was probably like 10 o'clock at night, and they're like, "You're on," and I was like, "Oh!" And so no one's listening to me until I shoot this fake raccoon into the front row.
Right.
This farmer stands up and screams, and then everyone, and it was just like, I had them, right? Like, and it was
Right.
just one of, and so there's sometimes little things that you can do. Is there something, in speaking or even in conversation that you find, I can't even take you seriously. It's just like,
Let's get serious for a moment, Anders, shall we?
flower
Yeah,
hat.
obviously I use a lot of props. I'm known for
Yeah.
a lot of props. I'm a
Yeah.
very visual presenter, right? But I think you're partly what comes to mind when you say that is very often I've had situations where you have to break the energy in the room, right? Something's happened and you need to shift that energy. So it might be doing something dramatically goofy, like your raccoon, getting one of my big props and just sitting there quietly. I've done that before until the room quiets and they're wondering, what the heck is he going to say now? And why is he wearing that goofy giant moose hat or whatever it may be? Sometimes it's engaging in some interaction where if I think the energy is really like it's just become this soul sucking experience for whatever reason in the room, I'll get everybody up on their feet to break up their energy and with a few simple exercises just to get people laughing and engage with each other. I've been known to do things like, because if you want an audience to focus on the front of the room, then I will ask the CEO or president to come up on stage for a moment as a volunteer. And Susan, how about you? Walter, would you mind joining me for a minute? And then everybody, oh, it's the boss. We A, have to pay attention, and B, oh, where is this going?
Right. Yeah, it's like that's, you know, I used to do the same thing in magic shows as well. That idea of pull the boss up on stage. Everyone wants to see what's going to happen, or if you take them down a little notch, everyone loves that. You know, different things like that. But that, you know, that audience volunteer piece. I think there's something interesting about that. Like bringing someone on stage. My mentor taught me like what you do to one, you do to all. Right. So it's kind of like when you bring someone in with you. Now, all of a sudden, everyone lives vicariously through that person, whether they're glad they're not that person or whether they want to be that person, right? So in that way, we are kind of pulling people in. So we got a quick Jody Urquhart, another speaker.
Jody,
do you know Jody?
I do know Jody.
She said, "What do you do with the CEO once he's on stage?" Yeah, Mike, what do you do with the CEO?
Jody wants to steal my idea. That's why she's asking. It depends on the situation or the context. Sometimes I have a quiz of really quirky trivia questions, and then I weave it into my presentation. Sometimes it'll be a theater improv exercise that I do with them, Jody, and different ones, but it'll do just something to break up the energy is the point. And even just getting them on stage immediately will change the energy in the room.
So, and then that changed the energy. You know, I've done some NLP master practitioner in that NLP, neuro linguistic programming, not natural language processing, which is in the tech circles that I run in. So that's what NLP is for that. But that's a pattern interrupt, right? There's something happening, and you are doing something so different that it just has to be noticed, you know?
Right. And you know, okay, and on that point, right, doesn't always have to be huge, doesn't have to be dramatic. I mean, simple little things. I remember years ago going to the pharmacist, right? Probably an introvert, quiet guy, white coat on, looking very professional, name tag here. But over here, over here, he had a badge that read, "Quit reading my badge." And of course, that's an immediate icebreaker, an immediate energy shifter, right? Because you look at the badge and you can't help but smile. Now you're staring at the badge. And his face just kind of lit up. And he said, yeah, I have a whole drawer full of these that he changes every day. So he puts on this goofy little small badge just as a way to connect in a different way with people.
And it's funny because he's training people to look at their badge if they ever come back. Like, oh, you have more than one? You know, like, it becomes a thing. It reminds me of, well, I've been at conventions with you and your badge ribbons you have, you know,
yes, plays well with others. And
it's the floor kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, okay. So I want to ask you, Mike, about perhaps, you know, how you speak, because I notice, I mean, I'm a pretty fast talker as well, especially when I'm in a presenting mode more so, and maybe cadence. Is that like you have a specific cadence that it kind of comes out of you? And I don't know if that's something you have cultivated, or if you are a product of your environment. Do you know what I mean? Like that the audience listened better when you did it that way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so, but you would have to tell me what you think my cadence is, and then maybe I would be shocked and go, "Oh, that's not at all what I was going for." But
no, it's not a bad thing or anything like that. You know, I'm saying like you kind of have a little more rapid fire, and then And then, but it has to do with the way you kind of set up some of your, and you comment and again, when you're saying you're not telling jokes, but you're being funny, you know what I mean? There is some tension and release to it. There is that kind of thing. I'm just curious, are you a product of your environment that just evolved, or was there something that you consciously did with the way that you kind of speak and deliver in terms of your presentations?
Again, I would say yes. It's a bit of both, for sure,
I
right?
mean, that's really long questions, and then you just give me, yeah, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
no. It's evolved, but it's intentional at the same time. Again, through practice, through trial and error, trying different things. Yes, I'm a very high energy, fast paced
Yeah.
speaker, and sometimes that can be to my detriment. I know I do sometimes have to make sure I'm intentional in telling my voice, okay, slow down for this next bit, Mike, because the delivery requires a little slower delivery. Mix up the pacing a little bit. I have to be careful if it's a more funny talk that I'm not stepping on the laughter, right? So that I am making sure I'm pausing for the humor to settle in and for the laughter to die down, so I don't step on that line and people can't hear my next line, right?
Yeah.
So I try to make sure I'm creating hopefully some diversity in my pacing, in my tone of voice even. Sometimes my props will help me with the pacing, because I'll even be quiet for 20 seconds if I'm doing something a little more involved with some props or with some PowerPoint slides. I might be mixing up the pacing depending on the image and using the image as a punchline, for example, where I don't say anything. I just click and then.
And so from all of that, it is dynamics, right? Contrast. And that's one of the things we teach in some of our courses too, is that idea that the more changes, the more differences you create, the more interesting it is, right? So that, like you said, slowing things down, getting quieter, being completely quiet, like you said, putting on one of your funny hats, and sitting there in silence on stage, that will get people's attention because they just don't know what's going to happen next, right? And it's
yeah. Anytime you can create that element of what's going to happen next, right? Or even just making a comment. I can think of examples where I've generated huge amounts of laughter through just a setup part to an observation or a joke without even getting to my next line, because I think that tension has been created so powerfully. Oh, where's he going with this? Right?
Yeah. See, and then we were talking kind of, voice, but also I think, and we did allude to this thing here. You can't see the bottom portion of this. I'm not doing it properly. Maybe you'll have to give me a lesson at the end. But you're also known for, how you move on stage too, I'd say. Like, exactly. And so did that come up from, have you always been quite physical in your presence?
Yeah, but again, that grew over the years. I remember early, in fact, in my first year in speaking, where I'd done a couple of talks. I still remember the talk. It was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I phoned my wife. I think I phoned from a payphone. That's how long ago this was. And she said, "How'd the talk go?" And I said, "Yeah, it was okay, right?" But I knew okay wasn't going to be good enough if I was going to build a career out of this crazy thing. So my next talk, I decided to move the lever. I was still pretty fun. I think I was engaging, but I had pulled back on that because those little internal voices, right, that said, "Oh, I've got to business this up because I'm speaking to a business audience. I got to be a professional speaker. I got to be a business guy." So I was still fun, but I pulled back on my authentic, natural, goofy self. So I decided, I promised myself I was going to, my next talk, my next keynote, I was going to move the lever way over here and just go wild. And that's where I introduced a ton of physical elements, where I messed up my hair into stress dye, did the fun dance, right? Like, this to talk about being stressed out at work, right? And I did the fun dance, and I had all sorts of crazy props. I even took my pants off at one point. And I remember saying to myself, okay, I got to just try this, and either it's going to work or it's not. And I'm going to embarrass myself horribly. This talk took place in Winnipeg, Manitoba, beautiful Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I remember having this little thought, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I totally bomb. I embarrass myself on stage. And then look at this hair. Look at this thing. It's like a wild raccoon. It's like your raccoon jumped on my head. And I remember saying to myself, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I'll embarrass myself, humiliate myself, and well, I'll just never go back to Winnipeg again in my life.
Which isn't that big of a loss, really. Like, if you win,
I'm glad you said that. But I'm happy to say I got this rousing standing ovation. I got just this incredible response from the audience. I thought, okay, that's what I need to do.
So the feedback, and I think speakers are at an advantage in some ways. Like, just a one-on-one conversation with someone that isn't resulting in applause or laughter, or it could be like a sales consultation or whatever. You kind of don't really know how you're doing. Maybe if they buy right away, but
Right.
the idea though is the audience will tell you. Like, it's a feedback loop that is quite tight, right? And I was just thinking about this the other day because I was making filming some footage for one of our clients, Veeam, and it's only about a minute long, a piece that I would do, and then I'd go back and I'd watch it and go, oh, that's not as high energy as I thought it was, right?
Right.
And that's the trick with these darn cameras and not having people around you. You don't really exude the energy you think you do, right? With virtual and what have you. So I go back and do it again and again, and it's just an amazing exercise for someone to go, oh, that's what that looked like. Okay,
Right.
now I know, right? And so having a good feedback, for whether you're being coached or you're recording yourself or the audience telling you, is a great way to evolve into yourself, like being authentic. And again, going back, you are actually revealing more of who you are to get
Exactly. Yeah. But I would challenge people too, though, even in those one-on-one situations that you mentioned, Anders, as being in a sales conversation, that you still do have some feedback at your disposal. If you develop those skills, if you're really listening, right, active listening skills, then you should be cueing into people's facial expressions and body language and the questions that they're asking that you're pulling out of them. Are they showing an interest? Do they want to keep the conversation going? And learn to measure those things. I think it's really important in any situation to get feedback.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything that you think we need to touch on here, Mike, that we haven't talked about? Like, I mean, I could talk to you all day.
I know. Well, this topic is so huge, right? I mean, we talk about everything: body language and listening and active listening skills and being in the moment, and even just doing simple like customer service element to engaging people, right? Consistently going the extra inch, doing just something a little different than what nobody else does, right? Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and when you said that, like in a customer service piece or just the willing, like there's one thing about being engaging, but there's also this idea of being willing to engage. Do you know what I mean? Like making that first move or doing that first piece, kind of like the pharmacist with the name badge, the funny name badge. They were kind of putting themselves out there to create engagement, right? And so sometimes that's where people aren't willing to take that first chance. Well, just like you with that talk where you did mess up your hair, you got got a little more animated, right?
Yeah, I think to adopt that mindset of being the director of first impressions for your company, and whether that first impression is through an email, through a phone call, your voicemail, through I remember, speaking of voice, I love this story still. Shutterfly, the online photo web sharing site, I share this story all the time. Phoned them up years ago with a customer complaint, got the usual automated voicemail response that drives a lot of us nuts. But then at the end, they did something that was totally engaging. They said, if you want to hear all these options again, but in pirate, press 9. Well, of course I wanted to hear pirate. Who would not want to hear pirate? So I chose the pirate option. There's a pirate there, right? That's the director of first impressions mentality from that company. So no matter what you're doing, we know from email messages, even keeping them conversational, adding humor gets something like a 43% higher response rate when you put a little humor in your emails. Just doing something to have that mindset.
That's great. Great tips, and also just a reminder of there are multiple touch points. Right? Like, all those pieces are leading towards and how people perceive the brand, moments of truth, moments of engagement. Jody has a question here. She's
hey,
Michael, she said, "How are you doing comedy on virtual platforms?" So this is kind of, I suppose if you're on a webinar and you
Yeah.
can't see the audience, are you still, that would, I think, is sometimes the concern people have, is that they're putting it out there, but they're not getting feedback, right? If you're in a Zoom call with everyone who's live, well, at least you have that, sense of an audience.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Jody, for that. I don't really do comedy per se. I don't consider what I do comedy, but when I'm doing my presentations, my funny press Anders is laughing.
And the people who don't laugh also don't consider comedy, right?
Exactly. Yes. He was supposed to be funny. What the heck? So yeah, it's I mean, I'm using all sorts of different virtual platforms, often just what the client dictates, and as Anders alluded to, when I can see people's faces, it helps a little bit, although I don't necessarily need to see people's faces. In fact, I sometimes find that distracting if there's a lot of faces on the screen. I think engaging people through the chat box, and I love doing that and keeping it very kind of, again, improv oriented, where I'm feeding off the little comments that I see. And I tend to be very rapid pace, especially so in my virtual presentation. But I started doing webinars about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember the first few thinking, oh, these are brutal. I'm doing the Home Alone kid face right now, I realize. These are brutal because you have it's like speaking into a void, right? It's just one way. And you're sitting there for an hour behind your computer. And these webinars, they were done through a company, no chat, no chat box feature, no interaction at all. So it's an hour of me wondering if there's even one person out there listening to me. And that was a little nerve-wracking, but like anything, I practiced and I learned that I had to totally put on that performance mindset. And remember, this is a performance. Even if you're just in front of your web camera, it's a performance, and you got to up the energy and up the engagement. Hopefully, just
the Michael Kerr School of Engagement.
Just do this a lot. You'll be fine.
And I'm so glad you said that, Mike, too, because that's the thing that we're training a lot of salespeople, is that now that we're in virtual realm or virtual selling, there is a performance here, right? And you are kind of competing with other things people would watch on their computer, right? And so we need to up the ante in terms of how you deliver that, whether it is production value, whether it is being a little bit more to come across that webcam the way you want to be, right? So
right. And I think, as with anything, we haven't touched on the word relevant yet, Anders, but I think, especially with virtual presentations, you have to make sure you're relentlessly relevant to your audience with your content. So again, it comes down to having great content more than anything else, right? Yes, you want to deliver that content in an engaging way, but boy, make sure your content is relevant to their needs, that you're answering their questions, that you're addressing their concerns, you're addressing what's keeping them up at night. That is absolutely critical.
That totally reminds me of, is it Patricia Fripp, right? Is that right?
First
name?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she was quoted in saying is that, when someone said, what's the secret to, being a great professional speaker, and she said, well, I don't think there's one secret, but if there was one secret, I suppose it would be having the right message for the right audience, right? And that relevancy, that sense of interest, if it serves your audience, they will be engaged just by sheer connection of that message. And when I'm at trade shows, you should see some of the present demonstrations. Like, I've done Russian roulette with staple guns and all kinds of things, working in messaging that have an element of danger and all these exciting things. And then sometimes I'll look over and there'll just be it could be maybe a CTO of a company or something. He's a smart guy, but he's got no presentation skills, nothing, but everyone wants to know what he knows. And they'll have the crowd, right? And it's kind of like, the relevancy. Yeah, you're right. You can't that use.
And I would add one piece to Patricia Fripp's quote there: the right message to the right audience at the right time. And I think, especially now, during all the craziness that's going on in the world, we have to be especially sensitive to that too, right? Timing matters as well.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of timing, we were shooting for 24 minutes. We're coming up on 40. but that's okay.
We're having so much fun. I was going to share some more fun stuff with you.
Yeah, that's when you do have a good conversation, when you have a level of rapport with someone, there is time dilation occurs. You know, I've had that happen where it's kind of like I had a conversation with someone one time. We were just so in deep rapport that it was 5 hours went by. We were talking. My voice was sore. We was on a road trip, by the way. We were driving somewhere.
So not a keynote.
No,
where you forgot to end.
It was more of an intensive, I would call it. Yeah, no, but yeah, that's just amazing. So I think we'll end it here, Michael. I'd like to do this again with you sometime if you're willing.
We should, because I got all these fun, cool examples.
You got more examples? Okay, pull up one more example. Let's do
one more. Okay, let's do it. Well, yeah.
You're or unless you want to just tease for the next time. That's
no. Let's do this one because it'll be a fun one to end on. Because I want to remind people too that when we talk about this idea of engaging our clients, our customers, our audience, whoever that may be, it's in all different forms. It's from our business cards to how we answer the phone to everything, right? To emails, to our messaging, to our website, the whole works. In fact, Steve Martin, I love this. Apparently, if you run into Steve Martin, the comedian, the actor, he will give you a business card that essentially brands himself. And the card says, this card this card proves that you met me and that you found me to be charming, intelligent, witty. I forget the right, but brilliant. We brand ourselves for all of this. So I want to share this fun example that I got from and it was actually an audience member who came up to me and said, Mike, you gotta order some deodorant. I tried not to be offended, but she explained, no, it's not you, nothing to do with you personally. Order this deodorant from a company called Native Deodorant. I just order them and then email me back after you order from them. Okay, I'll play along. It was like $9, right? So I ordered this. Here's the email response that I got from Native Deodorant. Michael, you rock. That was the subject line in the email. It was just another mundane day at our office when suddenly Jackie took a look at the computer and her eyes widened. We did it, she exclaimed. We got an order from Michael Kerr. Laura jumped out of her chair and ran to Jackie's desk. She didn't even read the entire email. She just saw Michael and started screaming in delight. Oh my God, Laura shouted. This is real. We have an order from Michael Kerr. The entire office erupted in applause. Party in the USA blurred from the speakers as confetti rained down from the ceiling and champagne bottles were popped. Now, isn't that awesome? Like it wasn't one of those generic blah, 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 thank you for your order, right? This is what we're talking about here. Just adding a little personality, a little humanity, some authenticity, some humor to jump out.
Yeah, I love that. And it also makes me want to go into another topic, which we might wait for another time. But it tells a story almost, right? That you get sucked into the way that is written. You're kind of like I couldn't help but picturing, what it said, the confetti and the champagne and the hearing the music and everything like that. So
yeah, like and how many people have I told this to now, right? You want to share when you get those interesting examples, when you do something a little bit different, you share it with the world. You go on your social media page and talk about it. You talk about it to your audiences, to your friends, to your relatives, right? It's just standing out from the herd to be heard. And yes, we didn't even talk about stories. That's a whole other way to be engaging.
All right. Well, we'll do this another time. I've decided.
I look forward to it.
All right. Hey, Michael, thank you so much for being here. For everyone who's, especially Jody, like, hey, Jody, you win comment queen of the day. So
thank
I appreciate
you, Jody. Do we have lovely parting gifts for Jody? Does she win like a trip to Hawaii or something? Or?
I'll figure it out. Yeah, that's right. We'll have some gifts for most original comment, most frequent commenter.
Most frequent commenter.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for watching this. We'll do more of this. We'll bring more engaging personalities. Again, Mike, thanks for doing this, and we will do it again.
Hey, thank you so much, Anders. It's been an honor to be with you. Thank you, everyone.